Welcome to this interview with Professor Dr. Vlad Glăveanu. Vlad Glăveanu is Associate Professor and Head of the Department of Psychology and Professional Counseling. He is the Director of the Webster Center for Creativity and Innovation at Webster University in Geneva, Switzerland. He is Associate Professor at the University of Bergen in Norway. His work develops a socio-cultural understanding of creativity and has been published in over 150 articles and chapters. Vlad is the author of the book entitled Distributed Creativity with Springer. He is the editor of the Creativity Reader, Oxford University Press, and currently editor of the Belgrave Encyclopedia of the Possible, to be completed in the next year. He is a frequent conference speaker and has presented a large number of papers, workshops, and keynotes at national, regional, and international conferences. The International Center for Innovation in Education, ICIE, is very pleased to meet with you, Vlad Glăveanu. So welcome to this interview with Vlad. So will you please, at the beginning of this interview, introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you and hopefully to a wider audience. So my name is Vlad Glăveanu. I'm currently the head of the Department of Psychology and Counseling at Webster University, Geneva. I'm also director of the Webster Center for Creativity and Innovation. And I'm also collaborating with the University of Bergen with their Center for the Science of Learning and Technology.
And what motivates you to come to this field of knowledge?
Oh, so I've been working on creativity for, I think, more than 10 years, definitely, since I was doing my PhD and even before. So I did my PhD in London on the topic of creativity and culture. I was very interested by the relation between creativity and community, which was quite a different topic, I would say, than most people's interest, which is very much on creativity at an individual level. So my approach has always been very social. It comes out of my own training, which is as a social psychologist. So in that sense, perhaps a bit different, as I said, than the individual differences approach, which is quite dominant, or the neuroscience approach, which are quite dominant in the field. What motivated me, I think it was the fact that, well, my mother was an art teacher. She retired in the meantime. So I grew up a bit surrounded by painting. I went to some artist camps back in the day, and I was fascinated by people's productions, but also the meaning they put into it. So I think that one of my biggest passions about creativity is to understand really how people create new meanings when it comes to an artwork, to their lives, to what they do at work. So that was really kind of my curiosity.
And as we know, you become an international scholar and you have that network. And you become one of the most, popular one in creativity. So can you tell us more about this network?
Right. So I developed a few networks across time, and I have to say that it's been an amazing experience, and I've been really humbled by the fact that when I started coming from this social psychology field and social and cultural, actually, psychology, I felt that I was putting up quite a tough critique of what was being done in creativity research, because I was quite critical of exactly what I said, the very individual focus. I was thinking that the social, the cultural, the material are not very present. And I thought that colleagues who work on creativity would probably be, kind of not so well inclined towards me when I was writing that. But on the contrary, I met an amazing group of people who, of course, have kind of the same questions. They might approach them differently. So over time, I managed to create a network, first for the Webster Center for Creativity and Innovation, where we have, I think, more than 12 partners, and ICIE is definitely one of them. But also now I developed what's called the Possibility Studies Network, which is another forum where colleagues come together. So It all started with trying to apply for some cost action money from the EU that never came to be. We tried 2 times, we're very, very close, but actually it gave us something different than just, you know, a period of funding. It gave us long-lasting relationships. So from that period on, I started collaborating a lot with, for instance, the Marconi Institute for Creativity in Italy, and that continued up until before the pandemic. We did a conference, I think one of its kind, that took place in 2 locations. So it was Geneva, and then we took a bus, a big bus together, and we went to Bologna to continue the same conference. So in terms of networking, this is really one of my passions. And I think it connects very well with this social view of creativity, right? You have to connect, you have to collaborate. So yeah, it's living true to the message.
And as I know you are very interested in cross-cultural studies, so
Right.
would you please shed light on the
Right.
most important outcomes of your research
Mm.
in this context?
That's a very interesting question. So when it comes to culture, there are a few approaches to it. Let's say 3 main ones, okay? So the cross-cultural one is trying to understand what happens. Like, I'm from Romania originally, right? Romania versus Switzerland, where I am now, versus Germany, where you are. And it looks at culture a bit across national, ethnic, or, you know, kind of national boundaries, which works and doesn't work, because as we know, for instance, Romania has many subcultures within it, Germany as well, I'm certain. So we have to look at culture a bit more from the inside, instead of always trying to compare from the outside with the same measurement, right? Because one issue with cross-cultural research is that you apply the same kind of unit to both contexts, but people come from very different kind of understandings of it. So I'm much more of a kind of a fan of what's called sociocultural approaches, which look at culture as this environment that we all belong to, that we're all immersed in. So culture becomes, you know, language, objects, institutions, places, and not only norms or values, like in the cross-cultural approach. And then you have the third approach, which is called indigenous psychology. And it goes even further in saying that we should not try to compare, you know, like creativity from one context to the other. We should really understand it within its own context. So kind of building a new theory of creativity from the bottom up. You know, what is the Swiss version of creativity, or whatever we call it. So in terms of findings, right, in this big area, a lot of people talk still about the differences between East and West. You know, it's a very popular topic, it's been for a long time, and about how Western countries, whatever that is, because you see the definition is quite broad. I mean, Australia is a Western culture, and it's placed, you know, uniquely on the globe and so on. So cultures that are more individualistic in nature would emphasize personal creativity, and radical kind of revolutionary creations a bit more. Cultures that are more collectivist in nature, they would look more at creativity in a community context and emphasize this continuity between what was and what is. So creativity and tradition. But just to show how I'm kind of troubling a bit this distinction, my country, the one I'm coming from, Romania, you know, it's a very unique type of context. Is it Western? Is it Eastern? You know, it's been communist, now it's a democracy within the EU. So things are really changing. And the topic I chose, which is craft and creativity, is very much a collectivist kind of approach to creativity within a European Western context. So what I'm trying to say is that I think one of the key takeaways from looking at creativity and culture is never to say that everyone in the same country or community thinks the same way or creates the same way. We can have general tendencies, we can talk about general patterns, but then look at the specificity of where people come from, because you will be surprised as to the diversity within culture.
And in your own words, how you specify or you define the conception of creativity?
Oh, that in my own words. Well, I have a very long definition of it, but I'm not going to give
Yes.
you that one. But normally, so in psychology, we talk about this double criteria that's very popular. And it's a very much a product definition. So it looks at what people produce, ideas, practices, you know, an object. And it has to be, on the one hand, novel and original and surprising. I'm grouping several criteria together there. And then it has to be, on the other hand, appropriate, meaningful, useful. So something that is very novel and original, but not meaningful at all, it's actually bizarre rather than creative. Something that is very meaningful, very practical, but not novel, it's conventional. So it's not creative either. So creativity is a bit of the sweet spot that you can reach between these two tendencies. It has to be both. Now, in practice, of course, this is as I mentioned, a product definition. So by focusing us too much on the product, we don't really learn about how people create. And I think for me, a definition would have to take process and context into account. So I would be interested to define creativity. So if you ask me my own definition, right? For me, creativity is this act of repositioning yourself towards reality. You adopt a different position physically, conceptually, you know, psychologically, socially, a different role, and you look at reality with new eyes. You develop new perspectives on it. So for me, this act of repositioning and taking a new perspective is fundamental for what we call creativity. And it always happens within a context, you know, because for instance, a concrete example, right? What kind of positions can you take? You know, parent and child, or doctor and patient. There are so many positions, but they always vary according to the society and culture you're part of. So for me, the product definition is very important because it gives us important tools to look very concretely at what is creativity, but we need to understand the process. And there are different views of the process. This is just one proposal of it.
And based on this, what is the definition of innovation?
Ooh, okay.
Is there any connection, or there is a distinct, difference?
So
Or there is a
innovation,
distinction between both of them?
yeah. Well, people, you see, you can ask me, of course, because I have in the center that I'm leading, you have creativity and innovation.
Yes.
So there are different schools there. Innovation tends to be a little bit its own literature because it comes from slightly different disciplines than creativity. Creativity is very much studied by psychologists and educators a lot. Innovation tends to be studied a bit more by management, business type of people. But of course, there is a cross. So for instance, organizational psychologists or group psychology researchers would talk about both. Now, commonly, what people believe is the difference is that creativity is about getting the idea, so idea generation. Innovation is about implementing ideas, so making it happen. For me, it doesn't make sense to distinguish this so radically because as I think anyone can agree, you get ideas in the process of implementing them. So there is creativity, moments of intense creativity within a process of innovation. And the other way around, you never get an idea out of nowhere. You need to have been doing something. So for me, these two have a great overlap. I know that there are some people some people see them as completely distinct. Some people use the same, I know colleagues who say, I'm using creativity or innovation, it doesn't matter, right? But for me, I think if we use creativity to talk about the moment of emergence of novelty, and we use innovation to talk about making something of that novelty, these two are really interconnected. So I would be very suspicious if people said, I do creativity, I don't know about innovation, or the other way around. I think you must know something about it because it's part of a whole, right? So that's my my take.
Yeah, thank you. And what do you think about, the argument saying that we can train creativity? And as I know, you are one of the scholars who believe strongly more than in, for example, developing potential creativity, not training creativity.
Right. So the argument about training and creativity, yes, there's some. I think there are very few people today who would say that, that you cannot educate, that you either have it or not. But if you look at how people generally talk about creativity, actually, this is one conclusion that comes out of thinking about it as a purely individual quality. So if you relate creativity a lot to the brain, to biology, inadvertently, you're going to say that if you have a certain kind of makeup of your brain or whatever, you will automatically be more creative. According to a sociocultural approach, this cannot be valid because creativity is born out of this connection between yourself and other people, yourself and the world. So therefore, your own creative expression will vary enormously depending on who you're relating to and what context you're in. And these other people have a huge role when it comes to shaping your creativity, the way you have a great role and responsibility when it comes to shaping the creativity of others. So in a sociocultural approach, creativity is fundamentally something that develops and grows and is malleable throughout the lifetime and the life course. And it's really, the question becomes, what is the context that favors creativity? It's not only the person. You don't have to work only on the person. You don't have to work only on the context. You have to work on both and the relation between the two. So I would be interested, for instance, if I were to talk to educators about how can we create a context where it's safe to make errors, to take risks, to fail. It's okay to play. You know, these are things we know that are conducive for creativity. So it's all about creating the right context. It's not about just educating one individual or educating the teacher. It has to be both. So yeah, I'm a very big believer in I wouldn't say it, you know, educating creativity, of course, but when you educate creativity, you educate much more than just creativity, by the way, because creativity is not something separate from what we do. We do things and we live creatively. Creativity is a quality of human action. So when you educate creativity or for creativity, you also educate, you know, mathematics, language, human relations, all of that in a creative manner. So yeah, I think the only kind of observation I would have there is that creativity can be educated, but you should not educate for creativity alone. You need to think about the context and the content of that. You see, creativity is not separate. It's not something that you add and take. It belongs to the whole process to begin with. It's just bringing out the creative side of it. So that's yeah.
Yeah, I think this is very interesting. So implicitly, I can say you are trying to shed light on investment and also in development.
Right.
To
Exactly.
invest, for example, in creativity in general and try to develop what I say, the competences.
Right. So exactly. I mean, there is a balance between what you bring, you know, what you bring developmentally and what other people help you kind of accomplish. I'm a big believer in supporter of this Vygotskian view of the zone of proximal development, and this idea that in relation to other people, we develop much faster, you know. So I do believe that creativity needs to be role modeled, that we all have a responsibility to become a bit of models for other people, the way we build on the creativity of so many others, and we get inspiration from them. So that is fundamental. Mm-hmm.
And how do you think, how could we improve the educational system to make it like very suitable and the right incubator for teaching or teaching for thinking, for example, teaching for productive thinking and so on?
Right. Well, this is a big question because a lot of people argue that schools kill creativity. I'm not of that opinion for a few reasons. One of them is that you cannot kill creativity because it is part of what makes us human. I mean, of course, if you dehumanize someone, you know, if you put them in a completely terrible life context, in prison and isolated, yes, you can kill creativity and you're going to kill the humanity within them. But schools don't do that, you know. for as kind of strict as the system is, there is always room. And first of all, schools are a playground for learning, you know, and learning and creativity have a very deep connection with each other. Every time you learn a new idea, I mean, if you look at the Piagetian theory, you know, assimilate, accommodate, you restructure what you know. So there is a mini C kind of insight of creativity within learning as well. So for me, schools are not killing creativity. On the other hand, though, yes, schools could definitely do more to bring creativity up and to bring it to the front. Now, there are a few. I mean, more recently, I got interested in the question of wonder and wondering with an O, right? To wonder is to think deeply, to doubt, to raise questions, to be marveled, you know, to marvel at something. So for me, wondering is one way in which you open the door towards more creativity and more innovation. And in education as well. So how can we create pedagogies for wonder, pedagogies of wondering? How can we help students and teachers wonder within the classroom? I'm going to give you just one example of, or one concrete idea for that, and we can discuss more. Asking unknown questions would take us a long way. So teachers, when they think often about the curriculum in the classroom, they know where they want the students to go. So they have an end goal. And that is not necessarily bad. The issue is that you can allow multiple ways of reaching that end goal. You don't have to have everything planned in advance. This is something that our colleague Ron Baguetto also talks a lot about, unplanning. You have to have moments of spontaneity in teaching. So when teachers ask a question, usually they ask it in the classroom because A, they know the answer, and B, they want you to tell them exactly the answer they know, and then they're going to be happy about it. This is such a constraining way of doing education. Can we imagine a teacher who can answer a question that they don't know much about, and they just want to find out with the students, think together, look for things together? That would be such a different way of doing education. It would be so freeing to put teacher and student as co-creators of knowledge. You see, instead of having the teacher as the one who holds all the answers and the students as the ones who need to get those answers, to put both of them in an act of discovering the world. Of course, the teacher will know more. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's not like we should make the teacher a student. It's not about that. It's about the way we frame exercises. Students know that they need to read the mind of the teacher. They need to know, what are you thinking, so that I tell you what you think, so that you're gonna be happy. That's not the way, for a creative education. For a creative education, you need to think, they're asking me questions because, I need to go further, and everyone, there is space to know much more about everything. It's not like I need to reach that point and it's over. So how can we make education and educators understand that it's good to dwell into the unknown? This is what Heidegger would say, dwelling into the unknown. Education is so much about knowledge, but I think we don't fully appreciate the value of not knowing. And I'm not claiming not knowing, I'm not, of course, in today's, very troubled world, you have anti-science discourses and very relativistic, alternative facts. It's nothing about that. It's not about not knowing as a value. It's not promoting being ignorant. But if you go back to Socrates, right, who was the initiator of this method, the maiotic method, and everything he talked about, education based on inquiry, he used not knowing as a way to make people think deeper and further. This is what I think we should do in education, and do it authentically. Not just humiliate students for not knowing or immediately make them know, but let them sit a little bit with uncertainty, with not knowing. I think there is a great growth potential from that. So there is just one example of how education could be a bit different.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Vlad, do you think there is any connection between creativity and leadership
Ooh, yes.
on one hand, and creativity and mentorship on the other hand?
Right. So there is a big literature and growing on leadership and creativity, because in some ways, what I told you about how we look at creativity as an individual attribute, the way we thought of leaders was quite similar. I mean, some of the oldest theories of leadership were about charismatic leaders, the theory of the great men. Sadly, not women, it's very gendered, both the creativity and the leadership field. Who was recognized as a great leader? Who was recognized as a genius? It was usually men, historically. So they both need to come, a long way. So there are many links there, because a creator is typically a leader, at least in the way of thinking within the field. Some creators are a bit more modest and a bit more shy and a bit more introvert. That can definitely be the case. So they don't take up the role of a leader. Others do want to be leaders, explicitly. But in any case, they do lead further. I mean, if you take the very basic notion of leading, they lead the field further. So there is a component of leadership there within creativity. At the same time, you cannot be a leader without having any ounce and inclination towards creativity, because it's going to be a very kind of mechanistic type of leadership. It's bound to fail. We talk nowadays a lot about transformational leadership, the capacity for leaders to inspire. How do you inspire someone if you don't creatively try to understand who they are and kind of be, kind of relate to them in this kind of open and flexible way? So creativity is needed for leadership. Now, mentoring is an interesting thing, because not all leaders are mentors. They should be, but sadly not everyone, is taking up that role. Mentoring for me is guiding someone in their path and in their growth, on their life path, and guiding them to move further. And I think that if you're a mentor, first of all, you need to acknowledge the creative nature of every human being, because otherwise you're mentoring them to become, something predetermined, something fixed. Mentoring is about letting them become what they're likely and supposed to become, and what uses their talents, what uses someone's talents. So mentoring needs to take creativity into account. And you remember what I said about the role modeling for creativity. So the mentor needs to be a model as well. And you need to be authentic and creative in your own right, for me at least, to have a successful mentor-mentee type of relationship.
And is it possible to secure organizational creativity if I have a creative leader or
Yes,
creative
well,
leadership?
this is complicated because in an organization, like any human context, there's so many things that come into play. So the leader and let's say leader and followers, or manager and employees, or whatever, right? They definitely can do a lot if everyone is open to creativity, but there is much more to an organization. There is the organizational culture, there is the way things are usually done, there are norms. So people need to think about creativity in organizations in a much more systemic way. It's not enough to get a creative leader. The creative leader might meet a lot of resistance. Some of it might be justified. People don't want to risk everything or go completely out there. So it's not enough to just talk about creativity in organizations or hire one creative leader. You need to work with the whole system. You need to work with what makes sense for the people. Well, how is the culture, organized? And very often, I mean, we talk a lot about disruptive innovation. This is kind of the goal of a lot of organizations today, and Silicon Valley companies, and all these social media giants and so on. And look at the consequences. I mean, for the whole world, you look at how polarized and how misinformation online. I'm not saying that this is the only consequence. There are many good things that happen because of disruptive innovation, but you need to match the eagerness to do something radical with the wisdom. I think Robert Sternberg would talk about that, the wisdom to think, what are the consequences for my action? So me personally, I'm a big advocate of creativity in organizations, but a thoughtful and wise type of creativity, not just destroy everything for the sake of destroying everything, to rebuild. So I think, yeah, we need to look at it in this systemic and holistic and ethical way that's really, really needed.
Do you think it is wisdom or a combination of insightful and Gedanken or thought experimentation?
Or what? Sorry.
Is it wisdom or a combination of insight and Gedanken or thought experimentation?
Well, so let's see. You have insights, you have this thought experimentation, and you reach a new and surprising and appropriate conclusion. You reach a new idea. That's all fine. You need this question of what are the consequences of that idea. I don't know if many creators are raised, speaking of education, by the way, if we want to raise a new generation of creative people, we need to raise them with this understanding that their creativity has deep consequences and deeper than they might think. It's not just immediately making some customers happy or making money. It's about the environment. It's about other people. It's about the jobs or whatever processes that you eliminate to create something new. So I think that you need insight, you need thought experimentation, and you need this kind of ethical approach and systemic view of what you're doing when you create something. It might sound very radical because it seems like I'm addressing only big creators who create a new Facebook or whatever, but it's actually in everyday life. You need to, in the classroom as well, teachers should model this kind of creativity. I think late Anna Kraft was talking about, towards the end of her career, she was talking about wise and humanizing creativity. And I really love this concept. I think it's something that we should really think about as educators a lot.
That means you would like to make clear distinction between responsible and irresponsible creativity.
Yes, I I would. I think here, it goes back to another interesting discussion about intentionality and creativity. There are some, Weisberg and other authors, they believe that you always have to have an intention when you create, and it has to be intentional. But let's face it, we also create things and in ways that are a bit more, I wouldn't say automatic, but based on habits and the way we are. So we're not always having a clear intention of what I'm going to do with my creation. There is a lot of not knowing in the creative process. But having said that, once something is produced, you need to give yourself the time to think, so what does this mean for me, for other people, for future generations? You need to have that questioning of what you're doing. So I think that, yeah, definitely. And you can be responsible when you're not thoughtful at all about what's going to happen with what you created. And by the way, let's make another link here between creativity and innovation. You know, you remember our discussion about getting the idea and implementing ideas. There is a great risk if people separate these two things, that in an organization, you're going to have some people who are just there to disturb, to disrupt, to generate ideas, and then other people are responsible to do the groundwork. These are the workers who just put it into practice. That's really non-ethical and very bad, because the creator might not get to see the real consequences of what they're doing. They're just there to ideate and to become, you know, super out there and you know, really radical. So you need to bring these two together. Creators need to take responsibility for what they do as well. I think that's a very important thing.
And do you think there is any impact for digitization and this pandemic on creativity in general and the society, you know, in particular?
Right, absolutely. So the sociocultural approach is not only about society and other people, it's also about materiality. So technology is an important part of the tools, the actual tools we use to create. I mean, look at us now, we're communicating in a mediated form. It wouldn't be possible for us to communicate without this technology, right? So it's not only that technology enables you to continue your work, but it gives you new affordances to do something else. Like I discover in teaching now that I'm teaching, you know, through Zoom and other other platforms, that, you know, you can really become creative with the different boards they give you, with the splitting the groups, and then you can have new ideas about your own teaching when you look at what technology can give you. So I think there is a double dynamic there between creative people push technology further, and if you're really open, I think you can discover many new ways of doing things by using technology. So one of the, hopefully, I mean, you know, the coronavirus has been so terrible in so many ways, but one of the potentially good things that might come from that is that we need to rethink how we do things and how we interact with technology and how we might integrate it, and also what its limits might be. So there is a deep reflection, I think, about when this is all over, hopefully, what will happen, you know, will we go back fully as we were? Are we going to keep parts of technology, and which parts? And I think that's a big question for creativity researchers as well. You know, what are the consequences?
And do you think one of the consequences that people do realize the importance of creativity and the importance of investment in gifted education?
Well, I'm hoping they will. You always hope, especially after a moment of societal kind of upheaval and all. You would think that people would realize that we need very creative people to create, you know, the treatments, the vaccines, to set up new systems to help us. So people need to realize that it is human creativity that is going to take us out of the huge mess we're in. So hopefully there is an element of that. But I, you know, it's hard to be optimistic sometimes, because I think that there will be a great push after all of this is over to go back to normal. But I wonder what that new normal, you know, will be like. My hope is that people who invest in creativity and giftedness and these fields will try to use the pandemic as an opportunity to understand how interdisciplinary all the problems we're faced with are. Because the pandemic shows us that this is a virus, it's biological, but it's so much more than biological. It is a social question, it's a political question, it's an economic question, it's a philosophical question almost, you know, around who and how we help and all of that. So I think one amazing thing would be if people would challenge students to engage in interdisciplinary explorations. And the second one is exactly about giving them the space to understand that if schools are based on well-defined problems, life is based on ill-defined problems. So in schools, you have all of these are the premises, this is the outcome, get from here to there. In life, you have, these are the premises, I don't know what the outcome is, you know, I don't know how to get from here to there. So I think we need to stimulate much, much more of this, as I said, free exploration, wonderment, not knowing, uncertainty. We need to inject these into the way we do education, because life is all of that. We've seen it, you know, firsthand.
Really, I like your ideas relating to interdisciplinary and, you know, to create or to qualify more problem solvers.
Right. Right. I mean, that's a big lesson also from the sociocultural perspective, where you remember we define creativity as an act of repositioning and taking new perspectives. If you're in a group that is explicitly multidisciplinary, you're going to have to change roles and say, well, what would a biologist say? But what would a sociologist say? And even if you're not these people and you don't have all the knowledge to understand fully what they would say, just taking that view into account might transform the way you look at things. So there is a deep connection again between interdisciplinarity and the social and cultural approach to creativity, because they're both rooted in the idea of diversity and difference. And you know, in my work, I talked a lot, and with other colleagues as well, about difference being the engine of creativity. Difference is what creativity is nurtured on, right? The moment you notice that difference, you know, between what you expect and what you get, between the present, past, and future, between what you think and I think, then you get the opportunity to do something with it, you know. And yeah, so it's fundamental that we educate for openness to difference. You know, we make people open to difference.
And do you think, Vlad, that we have to introduce more of inquiry-based learning, creative problem solving, and something like this?
Right, absolutely. I mean, again, there is no one formula, so it would be wrong, I think, to say every discipline from now on is problem-based learning. Of course, problems, you know, they're everywhere. So it's easy to think of problems if you don't use a very narrow definition of a problem. You know, a lot of people might react to that saying, well, I do music, you know, I don't do technology or innovation, so I don't have the same problem. But even in art, there is a fundamental problem, which is how can I express all the complexity of my thought and emotion into something that then you see and triggers a new complexity within you. That is a problem. We don't think of it as a problem, but it is a kind of a challenge. It's a problem. So I think, you know, maybe it would even be good. Now I'm thinking out loud with you here in in Premiere for me too, that maybe we should think about challenge-based approaches, you know, because problem might be very reductive for some people. It might be like, it triggers this thing about mathematics and, you know, problems, you know, what are problems? So I think we need to focus on challenges, you know, definitely. And I think we need to bring education to real world concerns and use all of the theory to inform something concrete and something relevant for people. That's how you get students motivated. That's how you get them engaged. And that's how you see the value of education. At the end of the day, it's not knowing all the theories, but knowing them to do something that really matters. And what you talked about inquiry is absolutely the case. So inquiry-based education basically says, allow the students to reach new understandings that you did not pre-plan, you know, allow them to grow in different directions. I mean, if you don't do that, it's hard to even be called a real educator, I have to say. You would be called something like, you know, Paulo Freire, by the way, had this amazing, well, pedagogy of the oppressed and all, but he had this amazing metaphor. He called it the banking system for education. So he said that teachers, you know, and should be avoided, they look at the mind of the student as if they make a deposit, like the way we go to the bank and you deposit something inside. That's not how human beings work. We're not banks, we're not bank accounts. You need to stimulate the creativity of the student. Otherwise, all the learning in the world won't be as efficient. It won't even take place in a way, right?
And do you have time, I mean, to study or learn about best practices in Europe, for example, or in other parts of the world?
Right. I am starting. So I've been doing a few projects. Of course, with Corona is quite difficult, but I'm working with our colleague Ron Baghetto on a series of papers and then practices around creative experience. So we recently co-wrote an article in the Journal of Creativity Research Journal. There was quite a famous paper by now of colleagues who talked about the standard definition of creativity. So it's very well cited because people really look at how we define creativity, you know, but we propose a non-standard definition. So we say that at the heart of creative experience, there are a few things: open-endedness, non-linearity, pluriperspectivism and future orientation. So we try to bring creativity from the realm of just products and something concrete to the realm of experience and process. And we're hoping to develop new tools that we're going to try to apply here in Switzerland and in Arizona in the US where Ron is, and with other partners, because as you said, I do have a network of very interesting people in that regard, to try to see how you can devise pedagogical tools that stimulate nonlinearity, open-endedness, and so on, without making them rigid. I think the key question in this area is how can you help teachers with a flexible system in which they can compose their own exercise instead of just giving them an exercise. You remember that's the whole story about should you help people, fish, or you should give them a fish or give them the fishing rod. You definitely need to give them the fishing rod. We can create 20 exercises and then tell everyone, okay, do this. But it's pointless. You need to explain to teachers what are the building blocks to lead to a creative experience, and then let them play with that. Let them add to it, let them bring, culturally their own concerns and their own topics. So that's where we are in our conversation with Ron. He and I were trying to get this middle range of how you can develop pedagogical tools. And I'm collaborating with other places. There is a small, wonderful school here called Germain Dustel in Switzerland. And I'm working with them a little bit on developing workshops for students. So it's slow work, but I think, by talking to you and knowing the amazing network you have and the organization, we can leverage that up and maybe create something bigger out of it.
Yeah, thank you. And you were talking about pedagogical tools, but are you interested in tools aimed at measuring potential creativity?
Yes, well, this is a complex question, isn't it? So I appreciate the way you asked it. Are you interested in these tools? Because in my work, I rarely, if ever, measured creativity. I mean, I work in collaboration with other people, and they did the measurement, and that's fine for me. One of my big problems with measuring creativity is that often we measure it either with insight problems or divergent thinking or whatever we do, but we forget that that's just one angle, and we call it creativity when it's just divergent thinking. Do you see what I mean? So
Yes.
it's very hard to measure creativity because creativity is part of life. So it's a challenge. I'm not against trying to do it, and I think it's very important to have criteria. But I wish that all these papers who say the creativity score is, or we compared creativity, would try to qualify what they mean and say, well, we compare creativity when we define it as this and that, which is not the whole of creativity, but it is one way of approaching it. So that's one big thing with measurement. Me personally, I often tell this to people, I'm not asking as much how creative is this? Meaning, what is the level of this idea? Is it here? Is it there? But I'm asking, how is this creative? So I'm one of these people who likes to know, why would you call that creative? What kind of reasoning, what kind of ideas do you have to call something creative? And I think this goes a longer way. And the reason is, think about it in a classroom, right? So you go to the classroom and you're a creativity researcher and you have novelty, originality and usefulness. And then you take a lot of ideas from students and then you evaluate them based on your criteria. Okay, you reach a certain understanding. But the question is, what is novel for that classroom? You don't know. Maybe they did the day before something exactly the same. So it's not novel anymore. What is novel for that culture? It might be novel to you if you go study a class in China, but it's not novel for them. You see, what is useful? What is meaningful? There are some cultures who emphasize, you remember what we said, individualistic thinking and, the value of competition and making things better. There are cultures who emphasize cooperation and working with others. So what is useful for them will be different. So you see how it's so important when you want to measure creativity to understand what actually people mean by creativity. Otherwise, you're going to have a very, I call it a helicopter view of what creativity is. And I think it doesn't really help. So I'm not against measurement. I just wish that we could create these more complex and contextual ways of measuring.
And do you think competition has any negative impact on creativity?
Well, it can have, right? But I think, so the evil or the danger is not in competition itself. I think competition can be an enormous engine for creativity. The question is how people compete with each other. So I study social psychology, right? And I teach social psychology. And we know from so much literature there that people can easily become part of in-groups and out-groups and try to boost their own group and try to play down and push down the other. So this is almost like a natural tendency a lot of people have. Well, we need to avoid that process, that part of competition, which is complete kind of cohesion with your group and complete disregard and pushing back the other group. If we can have models where you can shift between competition and collaboration, I think that would be the key, because competition is very good. Otherwise, people don't feel compelled and motivated to do something and to do it quick and to do it better. But at the same time, if you make only competition, you're going to divide people. And at the end of the day, they're going to care more about winning than about what they do, right? So I feel like we need to rethink and to have a more kind of, as I said, even a collaborative view of competition. One way you can do it, by the way, is to always vary who works with who. So therefore, you give them an experience of what it means to be with others and also work against them, but kind of vary these conditions and to humanize your competitor. The danger with a lot of competition is that you end up dehumanizing. You think very poorly of them for no reason. I think in creativity, if you don't learn something from your competitor, if you don't learn a little bit from your competition, that's a huge missed opportunity. So we need to think how to make that kind of competition happen.
And this implies that we can make a clear distinction between a debate environment and conflict environment.
Between which environments?
Debate.
Oh, debate, yes. Yes.
And the conflict environment.
Right, absolutely. So we go back to inquiry-based approaches, right? Debate and doubt and questioning are very much part of any environment, whether it's collaboration or competition and so on. But it is healthy, to open up people to questioning. So debate is very healthy. But it can easily go into competition and conflict, and that's a very kind of interesting path that an educator needs to travel. You need to know how to stimulate a bit of competition in the class, and you need to know how to bring people together as well. And one way to do this, if we go back to what we said about wise and humanizing creativity, is actually to emphasize that at the end of the day, we're all in this together. We're all in this on the same planet, at least, and we need to care about that. So I think reminding people of what brings us together is important for a debate, for a competition, and for anything.
And what makes your group or your network more productive than others, or what contributes to
Well, you see here,
productivity?
this is a question about competition in a way, right? Because you're asking me why is my network more creative, more productive. I don't know if we're necessarily more productive than others, because I know there are other people, other networks that do amazing stuff. But I think one thing that triggers all of us, the people I work with very, very closely, is this kind of how can I say, this quest to create a positive change in the world. And I think that's really, really valuable, because at the end of the day, we keep talking about creativity, we measure it, we publish, it's all good and nice. But what does it mean? I feel like a lot of people that I'm in touch with, they really care for that question. What does this all mean? And we have to ask this question. We have to, more and more. You cannot, in the face of everything going on, just go on in the way we used to do it. So one thing is this kind of reflection on what does this all mean? And another one is I enjoy very much working with the people I'm collaborating with. It's such a, in the middle of everything with the pandemic and all, just talking to people and talking to you now, right? It just fills me with energy. I hope it's the same for you. It's this idea of exchanging ideas and just putting a pause on everything negative and thinking about reality and the deeper meaningful things that really matters. By the way, another person I work with so much is James Kaufman, who recently wrote about meaningfulness and meaning and creativity, and it's just a wonderful kind of addition to everything we're talking about.
And will you please shed some light on your recent projects?
Recent projects. Okay, so one thing I do is this project on creative experience. I'm trying with Ron and other colleagues to work on it. And I mentioned a little bit about creating tools and looking at education and all of that. But another one is I've been working for a long time with Constance de Saint Laurent and other colleagues, Joanna Literat and others, on online communities. So I'm quite interested, especially in the face of everything that is happening, about what's happening online and how people come together and how they learn, how they create, and also malevolent creativity. So I'm interested in the dark side of being online. I'm interested in how misinformation and polarization happen online. And you know, there is an element of creativity there. It's a very dark creativity, like the way, if you look at Twitter or Reddit, the way people insult others and create these closed communities. There is a linguistic creativity, you know, to give you just an example, which is such a sad example, but Democrat in the US, some people online say demon rat. Demon rat is a version of saying Democrat. Of course, it's a silly, demeaning, stupid thing, but you know what? It catches attention and people do tweet that and do retweet. So it's a creative product. It's a creative, a malevolent, negative creative product because it's insulting and demeaning. But there is creativity in the way we play with language online. So I'm interested in a lot of what communication online does to people, if there is a real debate online. So we worked with my colleagues on immigration. We tried to see if people take the perspective of migrants online and really not really. So it's a bit sad. And now we look at the pandemic and what people do online. So one of the most recent papers we have is about memes, these images that circulate online, and coronavirus memes. And it's about the political narratives embedded within these memes. So it's about how we tell stories about society and politics by thinking about the pandemic. And it's a fascinating, it might not immediately seem like it's about creativity, but I think at the end of the day, you know, it definitely goes in that direction. And what else I do? I have a long-standing collaboration with colleagues from Colombia. And we had a project with indigenous, rural, and Afro communities where we looked at the way they create and they organize themselves to basically fight for their rights and for their land and territory. It's just such a fascinating idea about social change and community. And now there is a project we applied for on peasants' rights and the peace process in Colombia and mining, artisanal mining. So instead of the mining of big companies, how local communities do mining in a more sustainable manner. So this is an interest of mine because it's again going back to the real world. We talk about creativity, we define it at this and that. What do people do to create their own lives, to help their community and to support a more sustainable and just world? What do they actually do? So I'm fascinated by all of these kind of community initiatives and bottom-up social change. I think that is an amazing topic for a creativity researcher. I would encourage people to, you know, to delve into that.
Going back to the dark creativity, is there any link between giftedness, creativity, and the tendency to be criminal?
Ooh, so okay, so this is a long. Yeah, no, it is an interesting question. Well, think about it in mythology. The Titan Prometheus, he's such an emblem of the creator. You know, when Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, she called it the modern Prometheus or something like that. So Prometheus is really the emblem of creators because he stole fire from the gods and gave it to humankind, right? So he stole, metaphorically, the creative spark. And that's why the gods were so mad that he gave creativity to the people. It's a very interesting metaphor, you know, it's a very deep kind of story if you read it in that way. But what happened to him? He was a criminal in the sense that Zeus had him chained and had the vulture come in and, you know, eat his liver every day. So it was a great punishment. So one of the first creators was actually a criminal. In the eyes of the gods, at least, you know, it was a hero for mankind, but a criminal for the gods. So there is always this element of transgression in creativity, because you always have to go a little bit beyond what is the norm, what is expected. So there is a deeper level there. The problem begins when criminality means actually looking at your own interest and consistently harming others and their interests. Creativity is not a zero-sum game. Creativity doesn't mean that I make this so that I lift myself up so that you can go down. No, for me, like the ethos of creativity, this is something I'm working with James on, this idea of the ethos of creativity should be about bringing everyone up. So if you talk about criminality, it needs to be in this idea of transgression that is useful. But I don't think that at its heart, creativity is a malevolent force. I think people use it for that, but I think it really misses the point of for me, being creative means being authentic and being open to the world. Because otherwise, how would you have that creative energy, right? We talked about perspectives and taking perspectives. If someone is truly a criminal, kind of malevolent person, they're not truly open to the world. They're actually open to their own interest only. So that is against the idea of creativity. So that's my complex answer of saying both that yes, they relate, but they relate in a special way.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vlad. So at the end of this interview, I am very pleased to have you, and in the name of the International Center for Innovation in Education, we would like to thank you so much, and we are so proud of you and
Thank you.
your contributions. And I would like to ask you to conclude the first interview with you by recommendations or any suggestions.
Well, suggestions. That's a tough question because we've said so many things that every single one could be a suggestion. But one suggestion, a practical thing I have is for people, when they think about creativity and their own creativity, to basically try to understand how that creativity relates to the world. That's one thing, because I think we often think about creativity as this inner gift that is mine. It's a very personal and a bit possessive kind of thing. This is me. We think of creativity as the arrow that goes from me to the world. It's a very me-centered phenomenon. And I'm not saying that the person is not involved. It's majorly involved. Of course, you as a person are creative, but you're never creative alone, and you're never creative out of nothing. So just being mindful of how creativity is more of a connection between you and the world rather than something you have. I think that can really take you a long way in exactly what we talked about. How do we do education? How do we look at society? How do we support social change and change for things that matter? So that is my invitation to people.
Yeah, thank you so much again, Vlad.
Thank you.
And we promise the audience that we will have another interview.
Oh, excellent.
Whenever it is possible. And I am sure they will be very interested to hear you again.
Excellent. Thank